By the way, was anyone up watching the Masters last night? No. Well, it was absolute sporting brilliance. It was fascinating. Rory did it. He's almost his best to throw away the golden opportunity of winning, being the first European to win a win the golf Grand Slam. Um, but it was absolutely brilliant, and yeah, there's so many lessons that you could be taken from it. The only reason I mention it now is I was up until gone midnight watching that, and the night before I was at a 50th, so I was up gone midnight at that. So me doing 2 nights on the trot beyond midnight is definitely not the norm, and definitely not. If my brain doesn't seem to be operating quite as quickly as it would normally, that will be the reason. Um, Fiona, do you know how far Claire is away?
Yes, apologies. She's just replied to my message. I think she's on the move, so she's hoping to join in just a second. It's probably best if you carry on without her.
I'll get started. Yes. So
Yeah.
hopefully you can. Brilliant. Thank you. So hopefully, and actually, she will have seen some of this content anyway, because this is taken from a piece that we did within the workshop. Um, but the idea of the backstage brainstorm is to come up with ways that we can make the processes that we have within our business run more efficiently, more scalable, more repeatable, because ultimately it's really important for the value of the business and the smooth running of the business. Um, so that's what I want to dive into, and what I want to do is I want to start by um, just kind of bringing out a piece called the business life cycle. Now, I know that Karen and Andrew, you've only been in one actual workshop. Did I talk about the business life cycle previously with you guys? Yeah, I thought I did. I thought I did in that. So hopefully this is not too new a concept, because yes, of course we touched on it in the leadership scale up. That's what we did. Um, so this process, for those of you who haven't seen this process is about sort of the fact that the business goes through a very similar life cycle to a human being. So the human is born, goes through infancy, has the toddler stage where it's kind of bumping into things and all over the place. Then it has the teenager stage where it takes lots of risk, but actually, some of them pay off. And those that don't take too many risks go through to young adult stage, and they become kind of much more dynamic. But it's still kind of it's they're still not at their prime. They say that the male brain doesn't reach maturity until about 43, I think. So when we hit maturity, then we become sort of the peak of ourselves, and then we kind of gradually go into midlife and aging. And the business does the same thing. And so what we end up with is these terms that we throw around in the trusted team. So you've got really, infancy and below, it's very much a lifestyle company. Founder manager company is the toddler. So it's very much all about the founder, and it's got a lot of kind of process problems and the like. And then it moves up when it gets to the teenage stage. It is still being led by the founder, but the founder is very much in the biggest bottleneck within that business. And as the business grows to being the leadership managed company, it's all operated through a good leadership team, which we talked about in the leadership scale up. And then the stage beyond that is a business that would grow whether the founder was there or not. So a leadership growth company is where that can, like, getting to the point where the business will run without the founder is great. But what you really want is to get to the point where the business would grow without the founder. Now, that doesn't mean the founder shouldn't be there, but it means that it should grow. It shouldn't be restrained by one person. And one of the key elements to getting a business to grow through the business life cycle is the processes that underpin that business, because it's those processes that mean that the business can repeatedly do what it does best, and it can be scalable, and it can deliver the same thing time and time again, regardless of who is implementing it. So the processes that go on backstage are really important to the business growth, and the business, ensuring that as you grow the business, it doesn't kind of end up doing less of the good stuff and the stuff that got it to being the business it was in the first place. So that's what we're talking about today, is we're talking about how can we refine some of the processes backstage to make it even better, even more repeatable. And there's a few stories that I just want to tell to prompt your thinking on this. So one of the stories, have I told you the Sweet Factory story yet? No, I haven't. Okay, good. I didn't think I had, but I was just suddenly having a flashback, and like I said, my brain is still only in first gear today. Um, so there was a story, and actually, I don't know the I can't remember the name of the actual Sweet Factory, but it's a true story. And it was a sweet company that had been world famous for literally decades, and it was made up. This sweet was made up of 37 ingredients, and these sweets have been selling well, but not spectacularly for literally decades. And a new CEO was brought in very much with a view to trying to drive the profitability and increase sales or increase the margins and improve the business. So the first thing he did was he looked at the cost, and he looked at it and went, 37 ingredients seems like a lot for a sweet that's this big. Um, so how can we I want you to go away and find a way of trimming it down to 35 ingredients. And sure enough, they did that. Uh, and they brought the ingredients down to 35. They tried the new sweet, went, yep, absolutely brilliant. Yep, crack on. Business sales continued to be exactly as they were, but costs had reduced, so their bottom line had gone up, and everybody thought what a genius this guy was. So a couple of years later, he's like, right, we need to go again. Let's try and get it down to 33 ingredients. So they try again the new sweet, absolutely fine. And gradually, and so they switch to 33 ingredients, and initially the profitability goes up again. But then what starts to happen is these consistent sales that have literally happened for decades start to drop off. And he can't work out why the sales of the sweets are dropping now when they've never dropped before. And while he's kind of chewing the cud on what was going wrong with the business under his watch, he happened to try one of the original 37 ingredient sweets. And what happened was he was like, oh my God, that's so much better than the 33 ingredient sweet we're now selling. And what happened was the difference between 37 and 35 hadn't been that great. And the difference between 35 and 33 hadn't been that great. But when you compared 37 to 33, it was actually a really significant difference. And this is what tends to happen in our business. We tend to have these little changes, and sometimes those can be negative impacts. And often we say, oh, we used to do this and it worked really well, and then for some reason we stopped doing it. I don't know why we stopped doing it. We stopped sending that extra letter to the clients here, or we stopped putting in that sort of quirky paragraph that was a little bit funny, or we stopped giving them the kind of really clear instructions to the car park. Whatever it is, we stop doing these things, and gradually things can become less efficient over time. And that's why it's really important to kind of revisit each of these processes that you have in the business. And another story, before I get you to do some work, is that so when Carol and I were dating fairly early on, we here's Claire. When Carol and I were dating, she would cook the roast beef, and she would always cut off the end of the roast beef before she served it. I was like, well, why are we doing this? Why is this bit of perfectly good beef at the end of the joint going in the bin every time? And she said, well, it's my nana's recipe, and that's what my nana does. So, well, this is ridiculous. So eventually we said, right, okay, Carol, speak to your nana and find out why it's important in the recipe we throw away this end of the beef. So she spoke to her nana, and she said, yeah, it's the reason that we cut the end of the joint off the beef is because otherwise it doesn't fit on my in my roasting tin. You're like, so sometimes we kind of do stuff because it's always being done, but actually it isn't relevant anymore. It is, so that's why we also want to revisit our processes. And the final thing, before you get to do some thinking of your own, is Steve Jobs' dad was a cabinet maker. And Steve Jobs' dad taught him that what goes on behind the scenes is just as important as what is seen front stage, as we would term it in the trusted team. So if you took one of Steve Jobs' dad's cabinets and you turned it around, the bit that faced the wall, the bit that nobody ever saw, was still beautifully crafted. And that's because it's really important what the detail you go into behind the scenes reflects what the product that is seen front stage. And that's one of the reasons why if you open up an iPhone, and you shouldn't ever open up an iPhone, but if you do open up an iPhone, it's still a thing of beauty. It's designed like it's the actual product, even though it's designed for nobody to ever really see it. Um, so we really want to go into the attention to detail of what's going on behind the scenes. And we use this term, which hopefully is self-explanatory, but this front stage, backstage terminology in the trusted team. So front stage is what your clients see. So that might be the letters you send them, the documents you give them, the brochures, the website, the experience they get when they come into reception. All of those sorts of things are front stage. Backstage is the processes that you work through to deliver whatever it is you do for those clients. And we really want to make sure that backstage is operating beautifully smoothly, because that's what gets your business growing. It allows it to be saleable and scalable in the future, because ultimately these processes are a key part of what make the business grow better, but also make it the most valuable it can be. So if you do ever want to sell it, then those processes will be absolutely fundamentally important to the valuation. Okay, so we'll carry on, because what I want to do now is before we actually go off and start building, get you to start, I mean, obviously we're not going to get you building any of these processes today because that takes a lot of time. I want to give you some tools around how you can do the process building more effectively, or how they can work better for you, or how you can build them out more quickly. And so I want to give you some ideas around this before we come back to the backstage brainstorm and work out the best way of implementing each of these ideas. I am old enough to remember the band Van Halen. I'm not sure if anyone else listened to Van Halen. I wasn't actually a huge fan. I was a big heavy metal fan when I was a teenager, but I wasn't a big Van Halen were a bit too glam rock for my liking. But in the 80s, Van Halen were probably the global superstars that were touring, had the biggest sort of live show, that they would tour the US, they tour the world, and they had this amazing live show that needed huge amounts of kind of production. And so what they did was they created what we would now call the outstanding operations, this one massive document that had absolutely everything in each, so for example, if they were playing Chicago next month, that would go to the Chicago organizer and he would be going through that process. And Van Halen got a bit of a reputation for being the sort of prima donnas of the rock world. And one of the reasons why they got this reputation was that they liked to eat M&Ms. They wanted M&Ms at backstage for each of their gigs, but they wanted the blue M&Ms removed. So they're like, oh, it's bloody prima donnas that won't eat blue M&Ms. But actually, it was a really clever technique to check that the processes had been followed. You see, it was really important that each city organizer followed all of the processes, because if they've got fireworks and fire going off all over the stage and people playing guitars from cables hanging in the air, health and safety is absolutely key. And what they needed was a visual reference as to see whether the person that had been tasked with organizing the thing had actually read the processes and followed the processes. And the way they did that was to say, we want M&Ms backstage for the band, but we want the blue ones removed. Because they knew if they saw that bowl of M&Ms and it had blue M&Ms in it, the processes hadn't been followed. And therefore they had much bigger problems, i.e. health and safety problems, that needed addressing. So you can put things into processes that aren't actually that important for the process, but they are a way of creating a visual reference to, yes, I know that somebody has done that particular thing because I can see this other thing has also been done. So that's what Van Halen did with the blue M&Ms. Now, when I started triathlon, I had like triathlon is the it's the weirdest of sports in that you have got all sorts of kit that you need. You've got to have, it was just like the first time I did a triathlon, I think it took me about 2 days to get to the point where I felt like I was organized to actually go to the race. And then on the morning of the race, I needed more lists and things to kind of make sure that I got everything out of the bags that I needed to, and they were all laid out in the right place and in the right order. Um, and I read a book right at the start, Beginner's Guide to Triathlon or something like that, and it talked me through, and it actually gave me as a starting point a whole load of checklists. And what it meant was that if I was doing a triathlon tomorrow, it'd probably take me about half an hour to get organized for it because I now have all the checklists I know. I print out the checklist and I just go through, crossing it all off, get it all. It's all ready in no time at all, and I'm 100% confident I've got everything I need because I've gone through my checklist. And checklists are obviously really powerful. We used to use them in Efficient Portfolio a lot, particularly for compliance. And when you think you know a process really well, you just kind of skip through it and you do it, but it's actually really easy to miss something. So just having a checklist of one form or another in the hub and spoke we have an app that so when they're doing the close down, they're just going through and going, yep, I've turned everything off. Yes, I've cleaned this room. Yes, I've put this on. Yes, I've done that. And it's just a visual reference to go, yep, dum, 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 all done. So the power of the checklist is actually really important in process building because it can just make sure that things don't get missed and the same thing happens time and time again. Um, and then a few ways that you can speed up this process, or make it more efficient, or indeed, if you're starting this process from scratch, as I think sort of Karen, you mentioned that you guys were, a few ways that you might want to think about doing this. So the app that I mentioned within the hub and spoke is called Leaf. It's mainly designed for a hospitality business, so it's not necessarily this particular app. But there are apps that will give you, so that's the app that gives them all of the checklists that they need to go through and go, yeah, I've done the closing down procedure today. I know everything is done. There's obviously lots of different apps depending on your sector that can help you do that. But a way of building out processes, so Matt from Accelerate, who's not here today, but they have used a business a web tool called Scribe for building out all of their processes, and they absolutely love that. It just means that you can have all of those processes in one central place. So Clive Woodward talks about the importance of having this hive of information, having it all really readily available, and putting it all in one place. And Scribe is the way that Accelerate do that within their business. One of the other great things that great tools that you can use to speed this process up is screen recording. And an example of that is Loom. Of course, you could use Zoom to do it as well. You can even use just the little screen grab feature within Windows to record your screen and microphone as well. But one of the really quick ways in this digital world to create great processes that are really user-friendly and that are really don't take long to produce is to just do the job that you would have done that you're trying to create the process for and record it at the same time. And all you've got to do is provide some voice commentary over it as if you'd got like a student sitting next to you, and hey presto, that video is then a process. And it might be that in your main overriding outstanding operations document that like if the process is you need to send this letter to this client, the only thing that then needs adding to that document is watch this video and it will explain. So Loom, Zoom, video capture, whatever mechanism you use for it is a really powerful way of building out these processes really quickly but painlessly too. A few other ways of doing it that are brilliant. So firstly, if you wanted to produce proper training videos for new employees, because of course the power of these processes is that if somebody is off sick, somebody leaves, whatever it is, nothing is lost in the sense of if it's all documented, somebody else can step into that role and perform that task. And that's why it makes a business so much more resilient. If you want to build out really great training videos for new team members or for parts of that process, a brilliant AI tool for that is Synthesia. So Synthesia is text to video. The video avatars aren't you guys, they're just straightforward Synthesia's avatars, but you can pick from a whole load of them. What I love about Synthesia is, if you've got a text document, which by the way, if you'd recorded it in Loom and you'd got the transcript of it from Loom, you could just drop that transcript into Synthesia, for example. But what's brilliant about that is if there's a change in the process, change in the legislation, change in whatever it is, you can just drop back into that, change the text that needs changing, hit generate, and you've got a whole brand new training video that's really up to date. So Synthesia is a really powerful tool for that. The next thing is creating custom GPTs. So once you've created all of these processes, it's really powerful to upload these into a custom GPT that is specifically around this process, around the business's outstanding operations. That way, staff and team members can go, if they've got a question about dress code or whatever it is, they can just go to the custom GPT, ask it the question, and it will tell them the answer instead of having to trawl through lots and lots of documents or a training video just to find one piece of information. And then the last thing you might want to do is you might want to turn some of those processes into a conversational podcast, and you can use Notebook LM to do that. So you might take that transcript of you explaining a process, and it might be that some processes are benefit from having a Notebook LM podcast generation for a new employee to listen to, particularly if it was on your company values or something like that. Actually listening to two people talk about that could be a really powerful way of getting that message over to them. The last thing before I get you guys to do some more work again is the principle of Netflix and no rules rules. Sometimes having processes or rules around processes actually just slows the whole thing down. So one of the things that Netflix was famous for was scrapping their holiday policy, and also their expense policy. Their expense policy went from a 15-page document or whatever it was to as long as it's in the interests of Netflix. That was their entire expense policy. As long as you could justify that an expense was to the benefit of Netflix. So for example, if you were flying to a conference, if you needed to speak at that conference the next day, business class was absolutely justifiable because you needed to be on best form for that. If you'd got 3 days before the conference started of chilling by the pool, then flying business class probably wasn't in Netflix's best interests. So scrapping some rules and actually giving the trust of the employees and sort of principles, it can often be a way of improving the way that the business is run. So I'm going to take you back to the backstage brainstorm. And what I want you to do is for each of those things that isn't working, I want you to think about, is there an experiment or is there new techniques or processes, whether it's, how can we think outside the box and improve how we do what we do? How can we work better as a team and collaborate better on these processes? And then how can we measure our success? Now, if you haven't built any of these processes, clearly that is going to be the first task, is to say, look, what processes do we need to build out first? Which ones are the most important? And who is going to be responsible for this? Because the last step here is who is responsible for doing this and by when. So it might be that if you haven't done these processes before, it might be you're thinking, well, okay, how do we best document that? How can we collaborate with that? But how do we do we use a Zoom video? Do we use a Loom video? Do we subscribe to something like Scribe to create these processes? But for each one of these things that's not working, and if like Karen and Andrew, you might and John, you might want to think about, okay, what processes are the most important ones that we need to document first and build that out and work out the best way of delivering that for the way that people are going to you want your team to be able to consume that information. So I appreciate that so we're still in the throes of it, as you probably picked up. But equally, hopefully you guys are starting to identify a list of processes that you need to build out, but also things that you can change within those processes to make them look and run even more effectively or more smoothly. One of the things that you might want to do is, so we have a list of all of the outstanding operations that we have within the business, and Charlotte's done an audit of all of them over the course of the last month or so. So we now have a list of ones that we know that we need to go back to and either completely redo or that have never been done or just update and tweak. And so we're going to, in our weekly meeting, we're going to have a check-in based on those processes and make sure that everyone's doing at least one of those a week so that we're working through those processes and they're all happening. If you've never done this before, one of the things I would suggest that you do is actually put aside a whole day of doing this. So we used to have a yearly outstanding operations day, and the team would all sit there and we'd get pizza in or whatever, and they would just have a day of working on the processes to build them all out. And I think if you're starting this process from fresh, I think that is a great way of nailing lots all in one go. But also one of the benefits of creating these processes is that what you'll find is when you're sitting there and writing it down, we'll go, well, why are we not doing that at the same time as this? Because that then improves the process. So by actually documenting it, you really improve the process itself as well. So one of the ways that you can do this is, so what I would suggest is for each of the processes that you need to complete, you might want to use the outstanding operation optimizer as a way of kind of quickly documenting what each step of the process is, but also by rethinking about how we could do that differently. I know when we've done this in the past, we've looked at it, you do this kind of like we sign up here and then we send them the welcome email here, but actually in here we could include access to other digital assets that so as you're doing it, you're thinking of new ideas. So for each one of the processes, I would recommend that you go through the outstanding operation optimizer, because that way you'll actually end up improving the processes that you create within the business. If you want to read more on this subject, the best book, without a doubt, in this space is the E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. Have any of you read the E-Myth Revisited? Okay, so this is so the subtext of this is why most small businesses don't work and what to do about it. I actually thought when I originally bought the book, it was why most small businesses fail, but I think that's been updated over time. But the E-Myth is brilliant in the sense that it's told through the story of a pie shop or a bakery, one or the other. It's a while since I've read it. But it really helps you understand why it's so important that you have these processes is documented. And also it's the mechanism by which you can delegate more and more. The better you get the processes documented, the more you can delegate to other people in the business, which is what allows you to focus on the one or two things that you both love and you're really good at, and therefore allowing the business to grow. So that is a fantastic book for understanding the importance of this and how you can do it and how you can delegate more once you have built these processes. I already mentioned No Rules, the story about Netflix. If you want to understand about kind of simplifying policies, then that's a great book and an interesting story. And then the other good one on this topic is Sir Clive Woodward's How to Win. He talks a lot about this hive learning and building this kind of centralized learning hub in business and in sport. It's some great stories, obviously, as you would expect from the world of rugby, from Sir Clive Woodward in that book. But it really helps you understand how you can build those processes out and the importance of them.